Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, spirits, and the metaphysical? How about Mothman, Bigfoot, and other cryptids? What about UFOs, UAPs, and other anomalous phenomenon? Then you need to check out Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. We have all that and more. Watch our series, Cap's Road Trip, where we travel across the U.S. in search of these phenomena and bring you not only the history of these locations, events, and encounters, but evidence that we capture along the way. Alongside our team of researchers and investigators, you never know who will be joining in on the investigations. Are you interested in Bigfoot in Upper Michigan? Check out Finding Heighten, a series documenting the Sasquatch activity on a very special 80-acre property just outside of Menominee that has been a hotspot since 2012. Are you looking for something to listen to on your morning commute, road trip, or just hanging out? Head on over to our YouTube and check out one of our several podcasts hosted by members of the CAPS team. Topics and shows spanning everything from paranormal, UFOs, metaphysical, cryptids, and more. And if you're into spooky, check out our mini-series, Spirits of Menominee, which documents the paranormal activity of downtown Menominee, Michigan, or Spirits of Macville, where we investigate one very active location. Head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button, and you won't miss a minute. Good morning, monsters, and welcome to this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge on the Untold Radio Network. I am your host, Barnaby Jones, and we are live on the Untold Radio Network today. We have a great show here. We have an awesome guest coming from across the pond, as they say. And we got a couple things coming up here for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. We are going to be in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. If you want to come see us and meet us in person, we are going to be at the Hodag Heritage Festival, May 18th. And that is in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. We are also doing a Bigfoot expedition hike that evening at 7 p.m. Tickets are available on our website, wisconsincaps.com. Otherwise, the Hodag Heritage Festival is a free event. Come on out and join us. Then, guys, June 1st, we are going to be at the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. Myself, Chad Lewis, Rich Daniels, and our own Doug Hychek are going to be speaking there, as well as there will be a gallery reading by Angela Zabel. Tickets are $15 in advance or $20 at the door, or wherever you are in the world, you can come and check this out because you can get a virtual ticket and watch all the speakers for just $5. If you're going to be at the convention and want to come hang out with us even more, the evening before the convention, May 31st, we will be doing a Bigfoot expedition hike in Upper Michigan, and tickets available for that are going fast. There's only a few of those left. So head on over to wisconsincapsagain.com and check that out. And June 8th, we are going to be in Chicago for the Chicago Paranormal Convention. And then, guys, in August, we head to Pennsylvania for Squonkapalooza. And then in November, we are going to be at CryptidCon in Lexington, Kentucky. So that's what we got coming up. And I have a lot of library talks as well coming up here. You can see a brief list there. If you're watching this live, go ahead, or not live, but if you're watching this after the fact, go ahead and pause it and check that out. Otherwise, all those dates are on our website, wisconsincaps.com. Click on the public events page. And that's what we got coming up. Guys, I am excited for my guest today. I'm also losing my voice, and I don't know why. But I am excited here. So let's get this show on the road. My guest today is Andy McGrath. He is a paranormal researcher and a folklorist with over 25 years of experience in the field. He is a speaker, an investigator, a podcaster, and the author of several books, including The Beasts of Britain, Hairy Humanoids, and Nessie Friends. He is also the host of a new television series, Weird Britain, that seeks to celebrate the wonderful histories, mysteries, folklore, and fables of the British Isles. He is also the host of Beastly Theories podcast, a self-described hopeful endeavor to discuss the highs and lows of paranormal research and obsession. And now, without any further ado, please welcome to the show, Andy McGrath. Welcome to the show, man.
Hi, Barnaby. How you doing?
I'm doing well. We seem to have figured out that we have a slight delay with our podcast here. So if there's any awkwardness, that's why. So, but it's awesome to have you here, man. Thank you for joining us.
I'm very excited to be here, especially on the podcast. I'm always up for talking to our North American cousins, and of course, even though it's a rather large pond, the internet makes it smaller than it used to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always excited to have guests on from all over the country and definitely all over the world, because it's interesting to hear the differences and the similarities of the stuff that happens with these creatures and beings and stuff that are out there, and especially the folklore, history, and stuff of these things, because we think, unfortunately, there's still this stigma out there that Bigfoot is just one being, like one singular entity that is appeared around these different areas, and some people just have this very terrible misconception that this isn't a species or anything, and when we can bring to light all the differences from around the world, that these creatures are the same thing and there are more than one, and it goes a long way to help with that. So awesome.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of derogatory opinions out there, especially in the scientific community, but the large amount of hairy humanoids that are claimed all around the world. Most people think it's just in North America because that's the biggest country, has the most powerful media, and there is this subculture that we both belong to that celebrates it. So it has a Comic-Con aspect to it at the same time as being a serious research, which makes it hard to, from an academic point of view, makes it very hard to convince people you're actually looking into something that you think is a possibility.
Absolutely. Well, we have a couple of your books here up here. And so these are just two of your books. You have written several, like I said. What got you into the whole Bigfoot phenomenon and stuff over there?
I was into Nessie for years and years, and I was into cryptozoology all around the world since I was a teenager, which is a while ago. And I just always saved news clippings and everything. And I decided when I was 40, which is 8 years ago now, that I was going to write a book about cryptozoology. And then somebody said, well, why don't you write something about your own country, like Loch Ness and the rest of it? And I had an American friend who actually said, well, you've only got Nessie there in Britain anyway. There's nothing else. What would you write about? So I thought, right, I'll go and look for this stuff. And I found Bigfoot reports, a history of that within the Green Man and the wood woes that we have upon our architectural cathedrals and noble tapestries going back to the 11th and 12th century, even, and some before, that still exist to this day. All around the country, you could go and see them. And I thought, wow, is there something in this? There are modern reports as well. At least people think they're seeing these creatures. Could it be here? And I went on this big, I guess, 7 or 8 year investigation into the possibility of it being a reality here.
Very cool. I know I have not heard a lot of reports and stuff of Bigfoots being over in Europe and London, Britain area. So I'm very curious. Are you getting reports of these things? Because I know there's not much actual like wooded area around that. So what do you got going on over there?
So this strange thing, actually, yeah, and this is the weird thing, and I think there's a misperception about Britain anyway as a country. So they were comprised of four primary countries in the UK. So it's England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And within those countries, the entire mass of the country, only 6.8% of the entire country is built upon. And that includes like roads and rural settlements and everything as well. That's just 6.8% of the entire country. And when you get down to the individual nations that make up that country, I think it's 10.4% of England that's built upon. That's like, urban. And that's the most populated part of the country. 1.9% of Scotland, something like 4.6% of Wales, and even less in Northern Ireland. I don't remember the figure for that. But these are large spaces. Mostly at night, it's pure darkness. There's no lighting. It's rural. There's forests and woods and caves and mines and just this emptiness. When I walk around, and I travel around the country all the time, you walk around, there is an emptiness. So there certainly is space. There's room to be unseen, should you wish to be. Does it mean that there's a Bigfoot species here? I don't know. I really don't know. But people do report it. People have made very significant reports. One of which, just to give you an example, was made by a former primate keeper of almost 4 decades, who'd worked in all of the main zoos with chimpanzees and other types of apes and primates. And he was hunting, he was wild camping in Scotland, in Strath Bay Forest, with his brother in 2012. And they'd gone hunting for rabbits in the morning with light arms. We don't really have guns here, so they had very light arms, air guns and things that they could kill and capture and eat these rabbits for their breakfast. They'd scoped out a field the night before and gone there. So it's really early in the morning. It's dawn almost. They walk into this field, and ahead of them, they see what looks to be, he thought, something that looked like a bear, almost the same height as him, but crouched over, all black hair or fur on it. Looked like it was eating blackberries. And there are no bears in the UK, haven't been for almost 1,000 years, I think, in most areas. And he wonders to himself, what is this? What is this thing? Suddenly, it cocks its head to the side. It stands up and looks at them. And he described it as something with the bulk of a gorilla, but stood upright like a man, around about 7.5 to 8 feet tall, with a face that looked to him like an aging bonobo chimp with a very flat muzzle that was balding on top, and that sort of a pinkish lower lip. And he dropped the gun. He just was startled to look at this creature, and as a primate keeper, a primatologist, to see this amazing creature there in the forest. It looked at him, and then it just walked off, occasionally looking back to check where he was. After the creature leaves, he turns around to say to his brother, "Oh my goodness, did you see that? His brother's gone. He must have fled at the moment that they saw the creature." And he goes back to camp to find his brother quickly, packing everything away to leave the spot. And so they leave the spot, and his brother, allegedly, at the point I heard this story, had never, ever returned to the forest, will not go there. And he himself, the primary witness, the primatologist, became a Bigfoot obsessive, I guess, an enthusiast, looking all around the country for sightings of this elusive creature. And that, to me, it's a great sighting, at least from the British perspective, because there's somebody who knows what they should be looking at in terms of what a primate is and what exists, and yet he's seen something that he cannot explain.
Yeah, that's an amazing sighting from a primatologist, a zookeeper that deals with them. You can't have a better witness to describe what it is and what they saw. From the standpoint of, oh, it's just a bear they saw on its hind legs or something. Well, I'm pretty sure that a zookeeper that deals with these animals all the time would know the difference between a primate and a bear. So
Absolutely. And of course, when he describes the face, he describes something that he relates to an ape that he recognizes, but says the muzzle is flatter. And that's weird because we all know most apes have quite a prominent muzzle. And this one doesn't. It has almost like a flat face, almost flat, not quite. And that stood out to him. And I thought that was very, very interesting. There's another sighting that's close to me here in Surrey, something called the Box Hill ape, and this was again in 2012, which seems to be a good year for many of these sightings. And this was sighted by a runner. Now, Box Hill is an area in Dorking in Surrey, where there's this steep hill. I think it's about 800 feet elevation, and these earthen steps are cut into the side of the hill, and they're sort of fenced in with wood, almost wooden blocks. And people walk there. They go there all the time, and they often, some very crazy people, in my opinion, run up the steps for fitness at different points of the day. So there was a runner there late evening in the summer of 2012. It was still light, maybe sort of 9:30, something like that. And they said they were running up the steps leading to Box Hill on the North Downs in Surrey. And at the time, they'd heard these knocks, almost like somebody was knocking on wood, and they didn't know what that was. They just ignored it, but they noted that one feature and thought, what's that noise? And then when they finished their training session, the person sat down on the steps to drink a recovery drink and enjoy the cool summer air. And suddenly they felt uneasy, and they turned around and looked back up these steps because they heard some footsteps coming down and thought, no, well, there's a dog walker coming. I'll just move out of the way. And suddenly they could see this big man-like creature, and they described it as some sort of ape with brown-colored fur with patches of grey intermingled into it, with a human-like face, flat nose, with a really, really big jaw, sort of out of proportion to its head, and a domed head at the top. And it said it was looking at them, sort of slumped forward and had these long arms, very thick and muscly, very solid muscle creature, and just watched them for 30 seconds or so. Maybe it was 6 foot plus, 6.5 feet, and then just turned around and walked off. And again, occasionally looked back to check where the runner was before disappearing. And then he mentioned a very strange aspect, which corresponds with many Bigfoot sightings around the world, which is there was a stale farm animal like smell after the creature had left, which is a weird thing. And this is again is somebody without Bigfoot on the brain. They've had this strange experience, and they've already related wood knocks, stale smell, all these different things that really correspond to what people describe in North America and indeed other places around the globe.
that's interesting. You talk about the smell there. Do you have a lot of swampland or like cypress swamps or anything over there?
Not really. There are boggy areas in the UK, very, very boggy areas. But or moors, as we would call lots of them as well,
Yeah.
and bogs. But this isn't one of those areas. So that part of Surrey it's a very lovely part actually, but it's very rolling fields, forests, and hills, rivers, etc. And it leads down to the North Downs in Surrey, which is a very, very big rural and mostly wild and uninhabited area leading down toward the coast, and other areas of the country. So there is a good green highway, you could call it, from that position of Box Hill right down into the thicker forests and more rural parts of the countryside. So it's very possible something was visiting or walking through, or maybe who knows, maybe the individual imagined the whole thing. It's hard to know. These are just reports. You have to take them face value when they're given. But it does seem to be very, very unusual.
Well, the reason why I ask is, and then one of our comments here brings up the same point. The ones around here stink. It's not stale. It's an extremely like body odor,
Hmm.
urine, or feces smell. I've heard like rotting meat, skunk as well. And you're talking of more of like having this barnyard odor. And that's why I asked, do you have a lot of like these swampy, marshy areas? Because here in the US, we tend to find a lot of these sightings around there. You know, down in Florida, we have them, the skunk
Uh,
apes and stuff. So if they're living in these marshy, swampy areas, and you have that like pond scum that's attaching to them or something that would be giving off this odor, or based on their environment, if you don't have that kind of environment for them to live, they would possibly be giving off a completely different odor.
I believe it's some sort of. I theorize, I philosophize, even even say that it's some kind of skunk-like deterrent. Because there's so many reports around the world where people say they smelled the smell before seeing the creature, and then they became aware of it, or after the creature left and walked away from them, as if that smell is saying, "Don't follow me. I'm not nice. You don't want to be around me," and that this is somewhere where you shouldn't be. And the smell almost makes them feel like they're going to throw up. In other cases, it seems to be, as you say, more of a stale smell, and perhaps that's just an animal-like smell. Anybody who owns a dog knows that once you pet the dog for like 5 minutes, you've got a smell on you, haven't you? Animals have a smell, and who knows? Maybe that's just what they became aware of.
Absolutely. That's very interesting, though. That's part of what is important about talking about different things around the country and the world and stuff, to have these similarities and why these things are what they are and stuff. And you talked about them eating like the blackberries and stuff, and that's very common for around here, and very the dome shaped head, and it's a lot of the similar stuff. So it's very interesting. So you have Bigfoot, and we could talk this whole show on Bigfoot, but I'm betting that there are other weird creatures in your book as well. And being that we got you here, and we don't hear a lot of stuff from over there, I would love to hear some of the other stuff that you got going on over there. I know there's been you spoke a little bit about Nessie, and you're interested in that, as well as I know that there's been a lot of werewolf type creatures, or the dog man over there. So if you got any stories on that, or any research that you've done on that, I'd love to hear that as well.
Absolutely. So, of course, werewolf stories or Dogman's. In my book piece of written, actually, the title for the werewolf section is Dogman Rebranding the Werewolf. And let's face it, Dogman is a rebranding of the werewolf. And there's
Mhm.
something that we have in common in our cultures. We share a language, but we also share primarily cultures based upon Northern and Western European ancestry, largely anyway. And lots of those creatures that existed in the folklore of Northern and Western Europe now exist in North America. And the thing that proves that to me in a way is in the same way that the duende, sightings proliferate in Spain, Portugal, Latin America, and the Philippines, all places. Latin, Spanish, and Portuguese people have colonized and brought their folklore to. Now, whether these things are um, an interpretation based upon our background ethnicity, our ancestral ethnicity in North and South America or not, and we're using that as a way to describe what we're seeing, or whether they influence how we project onto the things that we encounter that we don't understand. Who knows? I'm always reminded of Moctezuma and the Aztecs. When they saw Cortez's ships coming toward them, when they were sailing toward them, they thought they were floating mountains, because that was the best description within their mental library of what they were seeing. Now they don't look like floating mountain ships, but that's the best they could do to describe it. I think there's something in that. But going back to werewolves, sorry, there are many, many sightings, and there's one of my favorites. I investigated. I actually went to the site. It was an old cemetery in London,
Mhm.
Camberwell Old Cemetery. And actually, this sighting, the first part of it anyway, I first heard about this from Linda Godfrey. And this was
Mhm.
October 9th, 1996. A man's en route to see a friend in Camberwell, and he's going through Camberwell Old Cemetery. So Camberwell is like this big housing area, big estate. It's sort of working class, a little bit troublesome, but it's an old estate. It's been there a long time, and the cemetery has 10 acres of forest in it. And there's this cut through. You can go right through the middle to cut through to the other side. It's really dark in there, but clearly, this person said, "I'm not walking around. I'm going to go through." And they did that. It's nighttime. Suddenly, this huge, like hugely strong thing grabs him by the arm and smashes him into the ground. And he looks up and sees this large creature with dark fur and a head like a German shepherd looking directly at him intently. He's slobbering and growling and stiff his body, all over like a dog would. And as quickly as the attack starts, it finishes and the thing sprints off on its hind legs. And the key aspect is the witness believes that he was spared because he suffers from a disease that dogs can smell, which is crazy. Now, that's not the only sighting. Some years later, a local woman contacted me and said, "Oh, I read about this 1996 encounter in this book, and I remember that you mentioned it in your book. And myself and a friend, we were walking past the cemetery at night, about 11:30 p.m. in 2004, and we were on the Underhill Road. That's the cemetery side of the road, when we suddenly heard this like really powerful growling, and one of the trees was being shaken. Something was shaking this tree with all its might. It's not a huge tree, but quite a thick tree, bigger than a human could handle. And it looked like the roots were going to be ripped out. Basically, it was really, really violent, and they just heard this growling. This really got this really sinister feel, and pegged it. Ran up the road in different directions, each to their own home, and never, they pointed this out, ever walked past the cemetery again. They were so scared of it. I thought, wow, that's such a great backup to Linda's original report.
Well, the tree shaking is something that you hear a lot about, with the Bigfoot sightings and that, but you don't. I don't hear a lot about it with the Dogman and that. But you bring up. Go ahead. You have something on that.
No, I was just nodding.
Okay.
I was just agreeing with you. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, you bring up this creature being seen in the cemetery, and I'm sure, have you done a lot of work with research of the church grims and the black dogs of the cemetery and that folklore?
I've only done a little bit field work anyway with Black Shuck in Suffolk. So the sightings that took place in the 1600s, where the churches in Bungay and Blythburgh, which are quite close by to each other in Suffolk, were essentially attacked by these black dogs. There was a storm. Everybody was inside the church, and the black dog ran into the church, savaged several people. The spire fell in on one of the churches, and on the second church, it actually left these huge um, burn marks in the shape of claws on the doors of the church, which are still there today, that you can see, and the whole town even still celebrates it. But this whole area, the East Anglia and stuff, like all of the areas that were inhabited, especially by the Angles, although it does proliferate black dogs throughout the country, have these demon dogs or grims, if you will, that seem to appear at will, vanish at will, but are corporeal for the point in which they're either attacking people or scaring the bejesus out of them.
That's really interesting because I bring that up because there's the lore and stuff of when churches first started cemeteries. When you first establish one, they would bury a dog in the cemetery as kind of like an offering, and the first person or creature that was buried in the cemetery was supposed to help ferry the souls across to the other side, and they usually use these dogs to do that. And that's where the mythology and stuff of the church grims or the dogs come from. But if these creatures are supposed to be there to help ferry the souls across and that, and then you're talking about them attacking people in the church, that kind of takes a totally different turn to what is supposed to be happening there.
I think there's something in it, but I also think this comes more from, this is also very based in sort of Scandinavian, so Northern German, Scandinavian, Danish, and Swedish, Norwegian folklore. I think these black dogs have a big meaning in this. I think the old English name for Shuk is Shuka, meaning it means devil or fiend. Maybe so. That's it seems to point towards its superstitious origins. It is strange though that you mention them being buried in churchyards because in Leiston Abbey, which is also in Suffolk, which is nearby to Blythburgh and Bungay, where these attacks allegedly happened. I think they unearthed 3 or 4 years ago. Archaeologists were working in the ruins of the abbey, and they unearthed a 7 foot long skeleton of a huge dog, which they now have and they're still examining for evidence. They have not given it back yet, or even given an opinion on what species it was or why it was there. But this was buried and would have probably been buried in the abbey while it was still functioning. Before Henry VIII did away with them all, that would have been buried there.
Wow, that's really interesting. I have not heard about that. Hmm. We have
And
to
huge,
take
7 feet, huge.
Yeah, yeah. That's like a dire wolf. Do you have those guys over in Europe? I'm not sure where they like the region where they lived and stuff were, but
We don't have dire wolves, and we haven't had wolves in the UK for.
mhm. Very interesting. All right. Well, we have to take a really quick break here for station identification, and we'll be right back.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
All right, and we want to thank AO, however you want to say that, for being a brand new Super Chats member here on the Untold Radio Network. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it here. Guys, if you have any questions or comments for my guest here, Andy McGrath, he is a author, researcher, paranormal folklorist, and author of several books and host of TV shows and podcasts over there in Britain. So if you guys have any questions for any creatures that you may have heard of over there or want to know more about, get them in the comments section, put them in all caps so that I get my attention drawn to them, and we will cover them as soon as we can here. So there you go. Welcome back to the show, Andy. So before I forget, there is one thing that you mentioned at the very beginning here and just kind of breezed over it. And I want to come back to this because there's some folklore that I'm interested in, and it is the Green Man.
Oh yeah, well, the Green Man, I haven't really stepped into that too far because I don't think it's really related to the Woodwose or the Bigfoot phenomenon. I think it's often associated with it because here's this man-like face covered in foliage, peering out of the woods, and often again portrayed upon depictions on cathedrals and tapestries and the other thing. But I think actually the Green Man, although it's seen as a pagan symbol, is possibly more of a Christian symbol, or at least there's a possibility that it might represent rebirth and the regeneration of man when he becomes a believer. And there he is, sort of emerging out of the forest again. Certainly, there could be some relations to things like satyrs and fauns and old pagan imagery that used to proliferate in the UK. So a lot of people might not realize this, but most of the UK only became completely Christian within the 15th and 16th century. During that time, or at least their symbols and their practices, during that time, the church was still busy Christianizing subjects of the holy wells and from pagan fountains and streams and sites and different things, and even changing the name of local pagan gods and goddesses into saints, and famous women in the church that then could be venerated in that same way. I wonder if the Green Man has a similar history, a similar beginning, but I'm not quite sure if he's really based upon an actual corporeal creature, more of a mythical and folkloric animal, a being that has some sort of spiritual, deeper meaning.
Interesting. You brought up another one here. I gotta touch on. A couple weeks, we are going to have Nathan Couch on our show talking all about the Goat Man and satyrs and stuff. And you brought that up as part of the little bit here. Have you had any encounters? Well, any encounters, any story encounters, or any mythology and stuff of any of those type creatures over there? The Goat Man or satyrs or any of these other more pagan and Greek and mythology and stuff.
We haven't, and you can actually go further back, I think, into into history, and you'll find Roman representations of them. So I think there were some coins recently unearthed in Suffolk which show a woman interacting with a satyr, with a horned satyr, right there with the the goat-like legs, the whole thing in its original depiction. And these coins have to be close to at least 16, 1700 years old, and they found that they're perfectly embossed, perfectly made, and yet there they are. There's that satyr. So we don't have any modern day reports about them. I often wondered if the satyrs became and the fauns, if they became the woodwoes eventually, or if the woodwoes, as it's portrayed mainly on churches and tapestries, this hairy, hair-covered man carrying a club ordinarily, if that was actually a more of a mutated depiction of Heracles, Hercules, this famous Greek and Roman demigod who is, famed for his strength and his virility, and the woodwose is always associated with virility and things like that in British tradition. Was that a version of him that we have here? Is that the reason we've got him on our cathedrals? I'm not sure, but the club to me seems to be a big giveaway. I really think that perhaps we could be looking at, some I don't want to swear. What's the right word? Some corrupted. I was going to say the B word then. Some corrupted version of Heracles making its way into Europe, becoming the woodwoes, and finally, in our modern day, perhaps even being a representation or related to a representation of the hairy man.
Interesting. We got a comment here. It said, I've heard accounts of green-coated Sasquatch. They look like they're covered in algae or the like, going back to kind of like the Green Man thing. But from my understanding, like the Green Man is, like you had said, a completely different mythology from the Sasquatch. But
I think so.
But it's definitely interesting, and I've heard LG and stuff, and I think when we were talking earlier about the skunk ape and that smell and stuff, and the differences in the landscape and that, and I think that might be kind of roll into all that. And again, another comment here, it says it would be a great camo device, meaning like camouflage to blend in more with having the LG and the stuff covering. So absolutely.
I think there's something in that, but then if it is an animal, most animals keep themselves very clean because that's part of being healthy. They clean their fur, they clean their hair, don't they? That's just a normal animal-like behavior. They don't just mess around. Even bears, I'm sure they get mucky from time to time, but I'm sure they give themselves a good clean. All animals do that, even deer. So I'm not sure if that would be a practical animal behavior if it was covered in algae all of the time, or hide. Maybe the skunk ape that works for, the swamps are swampy. If you live there, you just got to deal with it, right? Maybe that's the way it goes. But here, I can't see it happening. I think these creatures have plenty of really fresh running water sources to keep themselves clean and tidy.
That's definitely a very good point to make with the cleaning themselves and stuff. And I was kind of thinking through that as you're talking. You're 100% right. I think that most animals do keep themselves clean in that. On the flip side of that, though, you have animals like the elephants or hippos and stuff like that will purposely get themselves dirty. They will bathe in mud and stuff to keep themselves cool. And dirt and stuff, you see like horses rolling in it and that to keep like the bugs and the flies away. But that is, that's still completely different than covering yourself in algae or that kind of
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
to camouflage or hide or something.
yeah.
But
Mud and dirt is
oh,
like sunblock, isn't it, for animals?
mhm.
Dry mud, and dirt, mud that dries for elephants and hippos, and dirt for horses. That's your sunblock or your insect repellent.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But I'm not sure. I think algae and mud and slime. I think that would do the opposite. You'd be covered in flies, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I don't know. That's both. I could see both ways, both good points as far as to try and have some sort of a camouflage or a kind of repellent or something of some sort. But I don't know. I don't live in a swamp, so I don't know.
no, we should do like a live experiment. I'll come over and we'll get out there. We'll do the sort of the desert, the mud, the mud block next to the swamp block, and one of us will do like the Pepsi challenge, and we get out there. That would be fun actually. That would
I
be a lot
call
of
the
fun
mud. You can
for
roll in the
whoever.
swamp. It'd be good.
Oh, okay. I've got the swamp. Oh, nice. Oh no, I should have
Awesome.
called that at the beginning.
Yeah, you should have. See, there you
God
go.
damn it. You snooze, you
All right.
lose. Damn it.
All right, we can both do it. There we go. We'll take turns.
Okay. That's fair.
Science is always about
That's right.
reproducibility.
You have to verify my results. That's true.
That's right.
Exactly.
All right. You never know where these conversations are going to go, I tell you.
No, but I mean, at least now we've got a new research method. We're going to prove it. And I don't think anybody's thought of that before. Would be the first.
Mhm.
Sorry.
That's definitely interesting. Like I've never thought about that either. You know how you say like they keep themselves clean. So why would they have
Yeah.
keep covered in that stuff? But yeah, definitely interesting.
I think
All
about this
right.
all the time, Barnaby. If there are animals, treat them like animals. Like when we were looking for, or when we found the okapi and things like this, if people had said to us, oh, it runs into portals, and it disappears, and it can turn itself invisible, we'd think, oh, that's a bit strange for a weird giraffe-like animal that's supposed to be living in the forest, and maybe some of this is embellished, or maybe we've made up these explanations for not being able to find the animal because it's good at hiding and all the rest of that stuff. We rarely, with Bigfoot, we always fall into this trap of not treating it like an animal in a way.
We got another good point here. He says, hunters don't live in camo. They only do it when they need it.
That's true.
So that's,
Yeah.
roll in the mud when you gotta, or roll in the swamp and muck when you want to camouflage and stuff. And, a lot of people believe that these things are ambush predators. That's why they can disappear so quick and hide and avoid people and other animals and stuff because they have to in order to hunt. And, if they're just looking to do hiding and ambushing, that's probably a good point.
I think that comment is actually just unmade my whole point. Yeah, that's great. But maybe it's just temporary, and it's not a permanent state of being. Why not? Now you see, that's why it takes people to really think laterally. We're always thinking about permanence as researchers. Maybe they just do it sometimes. I love that. That's great.
This is the ones around here are clearly animals, 0 woo factor. And that's I do a lot of presentations on cryptozoology and stuff and different animals like the okapi and the platypus and stuff like that. And, so much of this stuff that people claim as the woo of these things, if you look at other animals and stuff, there's so many weird things that we have naturally occurring in the animal kingdom that, until you know what these things are capable of, it's possibly just very normal stuff.
That's true. So I used to make this point all the time, saying, in ancient times, the first person who dived into the ocean suddenly saw an octopus like mask itself against a rock, not only in color but like texture. Would have thought that was a magical power. What's the explanation for that? How is that possible without magic? Right? We know how they do it now. We understand it perfectly. Yet it's no less fascinating and amazing that they can do it. So maybe maybe not cloaking, but stuff that people talk about with infrasound would be a good example. We know some animals have infrasound, and many people have described Bigfoot encounters where they've either got the fear, a real fear, or they've almost felt sort of dizzy and unusual, and that their senses aren't working somehow, or even sick. Could that be some form of infrasound? And could that animal have it? I think yes, because we know other animals have it, and it can have strange effects on you. And we know that sound at certain levels can affect us, can affect all creatures. So yeah, why not? As to sort of predator-like cloaking, I would think that's more to do with, especially that we saw that voxelate description, gray and brown sort of strips of fur mixing in very well together, making it very easy for an animal of that with that broken up color, and all of the lines. I'm not describing this very well, but for an animal with that kind of um, discoloration in its fur, it would break up its shape and make it very easy for it to hide within the forest without being seen, very quickly. That was a long explanation. Sorry, I lost my way there. But yeah, I think, yeah, definitely they could have some of these things, but let's not go crazy with it. Let's not go predator with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you brought up the okapi and stuff too. Anybody that doesn't know what that is, go look it up real quick. But the okapi stands out like a sore thumb when you see it like at a zoo. Because it's a green background out there, a couple trees and the exhibits and stuff. But in the forest, when you have all that shading and leaf movement and stuff, those stripes and the brown coloration just blend right in, and it's very good.
And we don't think about that, do we? That why are zebras stripy, like you mentioned? Surely that makes it easier for the lions to catch. Well, it doesn't. It breaks up their shape. And that's why tigers are stripy. And surely an orange creature with black stripes is really easy to spot in the forest sneaking up on you. But it's not. It's not, and that's why it works.
Absolutely. Well, we are coming up on the 15 minutes left in the show here. So if anybody has any comments or questions, make sure you get them in. I want to obviously come back and talk about the Nessie, because we have not talked about that. And you said it was one of your favorites that you've researched. And I want to give you some time to talk about that as well, because tell me everything you got on Nessie. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on Nessie. So they're not very popular actually, but I've done research on lake monsters all over the world, and the one thing that really stands out to me about them, and again, there could be some cultural dispersion in the way we describe things in different parts of the world that may have affected how we see them today. Fine. Generally speaking, most lake monsters and sea monsters around the world have 2 or 3 descriptions that apply to them very well. And the most common one is this fat-bodied animal with 4 flippers, a long neck, a small head, and a tail of some kind. That looks sort of like a plesiosaur. And in most of the sightings that you have of them, at least some of those aspects are visible. If it's on land, the flippers, the fat body seems to be visible, the long neck. If it's in the water, where you see the neck with the head, or you see the humps, or some part of it, that always seems to match other sightings around the world. With Loch Ness, 1933 was, I suppose, the inauguration of world interest in it and the sightings that took place. But there had been sightings in that loch for hundreds of years before. Of course, we've got the St. Columba sighting in 565 AD in the River Ness, which empties out of the loch toward the ocean in the Moray Firth. That's very significant. But even since then, there are lots and lots of sightings, not only there, but in the other lochs, inland and sea, around Scotland. And in fact, around the UK, you find these sea serpent and lake monster sightings that are almost exactly the same as Nessie wherever you go. And it's interesting because surely if these things were real animals, you would be finding them not just in Loch Ness but everywhere else too. And you do. Those other places just aren't famous. And I think that's it's an amazing thing to me, that all the different primary cultures in the UK, the English, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Manx, the Cornish, and the Irish, especially the Irish, have tons of similar lake monsters, and they all have their same old names for them. Pierce, Kelpies, etc., Avanks for the Welsh, and we've been seeing something in our lakes for a very, very long time that always seems to have a very similar description. I think they're real. I think they're very, very rare. I don't know if they're prehistoric survivors. I don't know what they are, but I definitely think there is something that has a long lifespan, a slow metabolism, and some kind of ability to stay underwater for long periods of time. Perhaps like some turtles do, like the Hawkesbury River turtle can stay underwater for 3 days by converting oxygen through its cloacal bursae, in its orifice. There's these sort of little sacs there that fill up and they convert oxygen from water, so it can stay underwater for a long time. Maybe this creature has something like this, or maybe it's an amphibian. I don't know. Whatever it is, it seems to be there. It's shy, and it's very rare.
Very interesting. Did you get a chance to, I think it was last year, they had the world's largest Nessie search out there at Loch Ness. Did you get a chance to go out and be a part of that?
Yes. So what happened with the search, my very good friend, Alan McKenna from Loch Ness Exploration, decided he was going to do a search for the Loch Ness Centre. It's a big sort of old centre there that's recently been refurbished, and they started putting this great show in there about the history of Loch Ness. And we were talking, me and Alan. He said, well, we're going to do this big search. Will you be the documentary team? I was at the time filming Weird Britain, series 1 of Weird Britain, about the mysteries and the histories and folklore fables of the British Isles. And we said, yeah, we'll be the main documentary team. So we took our thermal drones, and we took our hydrophones and our ROVs and everything up there and did the expedition. It turned into a massive media circus, which was also a lot of fun. But essentially, that expedition was Alan's team going out with all of his volunteers and the Weird Britain team documenting it, and about 100 journalists who turned up and a load of volunteers. It was a lot of fun. We talked to Chi Kelly, and we interviewed her. So her footage is in our Loch Ness episode, which is it just aired on Blaze in the UK. It's not available in the US yet, but it should be by the summer. And we ran that together. Her 61 pictures. She was very credible. She'd spotted it in 2018. She's a translator, a normal working lady, and not wanted to say anything about it in case she was ridiculed. And then we had this big expedition 2023, and she came and she approached Steve Feltham, who's one of the longest researchers who's been there for 33 years. And it hit the press, and of course she was ridiculed. That's what happens when you reveal you've got something. But she was kind to us. She shared this information with us. We popped that in there while we were also filming the quest, as it was called. 2 awesome wild swimmers named Matty and Aga, who swim glacial lakes for fun, if you can imagine that. They'd come up for the quest, and they were swimming Loch Ness, and they got about a mile out and come back, and they filmed 3 humps in the water for about a minute, and they were very kind and shared their sighting and their review with us. We also dragged Ken Gerhard, our good friend Ken, over to be sort of the expert, while we were there, and it was great fun to see him face to face, find after all these years. And it was a great expedition. We found some evidence. We didn't pick up anything on the thermal drone, which we were really hoping something would happen. Well, we did. We picked up some campers on the other side of the loch, but we didn't pick up anything else. And the ROV, disappointingly, the Loch Ness is really filled and work. We went right down to the bottom there for several hours near Castle Urquhart, which is one of the most, it's the biggest hotspots for sightings. There's a great drop off there, and we saw nothing but bubbles and peat and mud, and it's just an incredibly difficult area to research. But while we were there, Alan McKenna did get, while he was being filmed on the boat with us, some great hydrophone sounds at the loch, which are in the documentary. And again, recently, I think on one of his other documentaries with a different company, he got almost what sounds like a growl with his hydrophone in the loch, which is amazing. It's fantastic.
Interesting. I always wondered that we haven't done any lake monsters or anything here for my team in the U.S. Because we want to do everything 100%. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it good. And I want to get the underwater sonar, the underwater drones, and all that stuff. So I was wondering, you said that you used the thermal drones. Now, I have two questions about that. One, you can't shoot thermal through glass because it reflects back.
Yeah.
So, first of all, can you shoot something underwater and actually get a thermal signature?
It would have to be something on the surface of the water. Now, originally, when we started the quest, we were bringing LiDAR, and
Okay.
something happened and the LiDAR wasn't working. We couldn't bring it. But the whole point was we were going to get thermal, hoping if it may be a warm-blooded creature, that we would see it on top of the water if it was there at night. So we used it at night. And the LiDAR was obviously to peer through the water, and it just didn't happen. Now, Scotland was very Scotland when we were there. It was it rained intensely and sideways rain perpetually, and we had a very fun instance because, of course, everybody went out, like the Celtic ones amongst us. I'm from Wales originally, from Irish background. Alan is Scottish, and we just stood there in the rain and got wet. But we had umbrellas because we're British and we know we're supposed to. It made it very difficult to research. Ken Gerhard, who's an awesome guy, when we first got off in Scotland, I said, umbrella, it was raining a bit. No, he said, men don't use umbrellas in Texas. I said, suit yourself. Fine. Within an hour, he's like, I'll take that umbrella now. Because he knew, of course, he knew that Texas is dry. You need an umbrella here, men or women. And it was a good laugh. They're doing another quest in the summer, the Loch Ness exploration people, and there's an article that's just gone viral around the world, and all the newspapers are picking it up, where they've basically, Alan McKenna, Loch Ness, they've asked NASA to come and help them. Now, I don't know if NASA will want to get involved. I think, some sort of, I would have personally approached James Cameron for his Challenger Deep sub. That would have been a great idea. I think this is the idea I had, and we couldn't do it this time because we didn't have the equipment. If you're looking for lake monsters in the US, all of my research is most of the sightings, especially in Loch Ness and everywhere else, are near river mouths where the fish come out into deep water and they're vulnerable. I would set up sonar activated cameras, weighted perhaps with a chain in mid-water, all of the river mouths near where there's been sightings. Especially if there's like a salmon run or trout or something is coming through, that's where the fish go into deep water. That's where they're suddenly vulnerable, and a predator would think that's a good opportunity for a feed.
That's a good point. I will definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, I wish I'd done it. I wish I had.
Do as I say, not as I do, he says.
I just didn't have the equipment. We couldn't get it sorted out. It's so complicated and so dark and muggy there. Anyway, it was like, well, if we spend all this money, will we actually even get anything? Even if it's there.
My second part of that thermal drone question was, if you're looking for reptiles or if this thing is possibly an amphibian, what kind of heat signature is that going to put off? Like, is it going to be like, do amphibians put off enough heat to even register on that?
I don't think so. I think it only would have worked had it been a warm-blooded animal. And that was one of the ideas. And even when we were talking to Ken, one of his theories was that to survive in that temperature, in that loch, this would have to be a warm-blooded animal. I'm not sure if that's true, actually, if it would have to be. You would imagine that reptile or amphibian or whatever it is, whatever might be there, would be well adapted to its environment and meant to be there over millennia, whatever period of time it's been there. And so it wouldn't be out of its remit. In the same way as when we say it's strange that it would be Bigfoot in the UK because it's not heavily forested. But if it's always been here, it would be adapted to this environment, not the Pacific Northwest. So I don't know. But I'm a hopeful believer in Nessie. Of course, it's romantic, isn't it? That's what started me. I don't have objectivity when it comes to that subject. I realize that I'm not objective when I get into the Nessie stuff. So I try to be my own critic, but very unsuccessfully most of the time.
All right, we got a couple question and comment here. Is there enough water available for a creature like this to travel to the sea comfortably? And if so, might not find anything when you look in the loch, but it's present at another time.
I had a theory for a long time that that the creatures were basically coming in and out of the loch via the River Ness. Now, via that's to the northeast, that way. And definitely when the River Ness is in spate, when it's in flood, it's possible, I think. And um, there have been several sightings. Have been many sightings of River Ness over the years as well. So it's it's very possible that it could come in and out that way, but not very frequently without being seen. It would have to be, because that goes right to the city of Inverness as well. There would be a point where the water's only 8 or 9 feet deep, or even less in some places, and even in flood, maybe only 10 or 12 feet deep, when this creature would have to come in and try not to be seen. There's a caveat to that, perhaps, in the fact that seals do get into the loch from the River Ness occasionally, and when they do get in, although they are spotted because of the nature of seals, they're not always spotted coming in, so they get in somehow without being seen. Maybe if there was a smaller juvenile species coming in, then it could, but I don't know. As I say, it has been spotted in the River Ness infrequently over the years, and it also has been spotted in Loch Lochy, Loch Oich, and the other lochs adjoining Loch Ness, and the rivers that lead from them, although they're quite fierce, they're only a few feet deep as well. But it is completely black after dark. I walked the path from Fort Augustus at the bottom of Loch Ness, along the River Oich, all the way to Loch Oich one time in the dark and back. It took me about 7 hours, but I couldn't see. One side was the Caledonian Canal, the other side was the River Oich, and I could not see anything to either side of me, even when I was right next to the river at any point. So if something had been there, I mean, I would have heard it, I guess, but I would not have seen it moving at that time of the night.
He brings up again, night travels is why you're not finding them, possibly, which you just said.
It's
When
completely
people are
black there after dark. There's no lighting around.
When people are looking for it, perhaps it runs. Could there be underground waterways?
I don't think so. I mean, this cave theory along Loch Ness has been there for ages, and they recently did lots of seismic surveys of the rock. And although it's really wrinkled up at the bottom, there could be some small caves at the side. There's not really a lot of room, and also the distance, the length of the cave would have to be, the underwater cave to get out to the sea would be huge. It'd have to be huge, and caves aren't really. It's not that kind of symmetry normally. That you'd have a cave large enough that would run all the way, straight to the sea. It doesn't. I don't think it works out that way. I think what we're trying to explain away is that it's not being seen when it's coming into the loch. But I think, generally speaking, if you see how absolutely rural and pristine the area is, especially after dark, you would then say, okay, I think, in the early hours when all the, even through the city of Inverness, when everyone's asleep and the lights are out and the river's in spate, something could come in and out. It's possible. The eastern ways, the northeastern ways, the easiest way. River Ness, Bewley Firth, Moray Firth, and you're in the sea suddenly. You're there, basically. And as I say, there have been sightings there over the years. From the western route, there are lots of obstructions in the way. There's the Lagan Lochs, the Loch Lochy, and the River Lochy, and eventually, when you go bypassing Neptune's staircase, you're down to Loch Heel. But there are dams and all different types of things in the way that would make it hard for the creature to get out and in that way.
Interesting. I was going to ask you if there's sightings in other lakes very close to Ness, but you kind of covered that there was.
Yeah.
going back in folklore and history and stuff of the area, has there been anything, like we talk about like the medieval folklore of the knights going out and slaying dragons, right? And this could be possibly why we don't have dragons today, because they killed them all. So do, do you have any folklore and legends and stuff of lake monsters or these creatures coming out of the water that were slain and killed and possibly just hunted to extinction? Why are they so fearful of people?
Yeah, I think there's lots of it's hard to pinpoint any now. I suppose the lantern worm would be a great story. The lantern knight who came, tried to destroy worm, just meaning an old word meaning serpent or dragon. In Old English and Norse, worm or orm would be a famous story. There's also the Knucker Pool in Sussex that was once the reputed haunt of a lake monster, but it lived in this large bottomless pool, basically, and dragged passers by in, whoever was fool enough to go there. All around the country, actually, you have these stories. People meeting, defeating dragons, dragons coming out of or serpents coming out of the water and carrying away sheep and people all around the place. I haven't included many of those in Beasts of Britain because it was largely about modern day sightings of possible animals and not ancient folklore or dragon lore. But there is a very good book that does include all of those things, which is called Lake Monsters and Sea Serpents of the British Isles. I think it's quite cheap to get. And it has every single nation in the UK with all of its historical reports, but dragon-like reports of lake monsters, which is it's good fun to read and definitely a bit more informative from a folkloric perspective than my book.
I'm just wondering, because, like we talk about these animals, well, why aren't there more of them? Were they possibly there? Well, if they were hunted to extinction and you have these stories of, these knights or, people going out and slaying these monsters and stuff, that one would give you a reason why they're so secluded and why they're not likely to come up against boats or people in general, because, for eons they've been killed every time they've come up and looked. And it would also be why we don't have more of these creatures in a larger population. So
yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. We looked at the British dragon recently when I was doing Weird Britain in Suffolk again, England, and that was a dragon that got out of the water, terrorized local villages. I think this was a real dragon as far as the villagers saw it. They had come to terrorize everybody. It was taking livestock, it was taking people, and a few knights were sent down to dispatch. I think the villagers just disappeared as far as I remember. This was around about 1405. There still actually is a huge carving, a chalk carving in the hillside of a dragon. And they said that the beast had a crested head, serrated teeth, long tail, terrorized the village, breathing fire, anything that moved, shepherding his flock. But there is a theory that was a crocodile that was given to Richard that's Richard the Lionheart as a gift from the Crusades, and that the reptile would have been kept at this big menagerie that the king had at the Tower of London, and basically it escaped and ended up in the marshes near Boroughs. And when you go into the one of the old churches in the area, I'm trying to remember the church name, Wissington Church, I think, there is a depiction of the villagers fighting off this beast, and it's a 15th century depiction of it, and in there is a crocodile. The dragon is depicted as a crocodile. So I wonder if some of these things, especially when people were traveling and bringing back exotic animals, were some of them actually out of place creatures that were just brought from parts of the world that we had no knowledge about at that time, crocodiles and lizards, or some of the Irish writers about lake monsters, especially on I think there's the seal serpent theory, which is a great book by Gary Cunningham and I forget his partner's name. Anyway, they wrote this great book saying, could these Irish lake monster seers, witnesses, have been seeing sea lions, that would just made their way across the Atlantic and just kept going and going until they ended up in these rivers and lakes and marshes, in Kilkenny and other places in Ireland. And then people saw them and thought, oh my goodness, what is this crazy creature? Didn't recognize it. And suddenly, it's the Doaku, or it's some sort of sea serpent or pierce that's suddenly terrorizing the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're not familiar with an animal, we talk about that all the time. These different people that out of place, you don't know what it is, and your mind has to put a title on it, and you come up with whatever it is that you mostly know. So, absolutely. Well, we are past our time. I appreciate you coming on so much. We have one last question here to get to. I don't want to keep you.
I'll be quick. I'll be quick.
No, by all means. Has anyone ever tried remote subs in Loch Ness?
I don't think so. You mean apart from ROVs? Definitely, we tried one, and lots of people have had them. There have been several submarines right from the time of Adrian Shine onwards that have been placed in the loch. Very recently, there was a sonar. I'll try and get the name of it for you. A sonar-driven submarine, unmanned submarine that was and found the original Challenger speed racer that was lost in Loch Ness. I think maybe it was in the 20s. Let me see what year that was. Loch Ness found, and so people put stuff in there all the time, but it's full of peat. Even when you've been in the hotel in Loch Ness, the water is brown, and it's not bad for you. It's brown because it's full of peat, basically. And that's it was John Cobb's Crusader. That's what it was. And there was something called the Loch Ness Project, and I think they used a very advanced sonar equipped sub to go and search out the bottom of the loch. This is I think, what was the last time? Maybe 2019. Maybe that's when they found it. Yeah. And they've been photographing the bottom of the loch with this fantastic sub, for years and years and years, and they have found nothing. Not a snippet, not even a hint of a monster. The whole time that they've been there. I think it's called the Moonin AUV. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to have you on, and I have so many more questions. If you're willing, I would love to have you come back, because I know we have just scratched the surface of the basics of everything that's going on over there, and I think it's a great show today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bonamy. I've loved it. I've loved getting to talk for once, the first time in about a year. And for all your listeners out there, I'm sorry if I went on, but I love this subject. There is, in America, in Britain, everywhere around the world, so much left to find.
Absolutely. So we have your two books here. You have other books out as well. You have your podcast. In the show notes, there's a Linktree link to all of that. You can find it there. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, promote, and what else? You got any new books coming out or anything?
I've got the Nessie and Friends book isn't out yet, and that's going to be a kids book, by the way. It's about lake monsters all around the world, and giving you nice information about them and their environments. That will be for children, although adults can get it as well. And just the Weird Britain show, which is on in the UK at the moment. That's the folklore, fables, mystery, and history of Britain. It will hopefully, we're talking to the distributors, be on American networks sometime in the summer or slightly after that.
Very cool. And your podcast as well, where can people find that?
Beastly Theories, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts, it'll be there. It is a self-described, low-tech, low-brow endeavor just to discuss the highs and lows of paranormal research and obsession. It is nothing like Barnaby's podcast. This is just, suddenly you hear me speaking. It won't even be an introduction, and I'll just waffle on with whoever I've convinced to talk to me for about an hour or so, and then fade out, and it'll be gone.
There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. I mean,
it's as nepotism. It's not even a podcast. It's just my excuse to chat to people. So.
That's kind of what this show is too. It doesn't show, but it's like I'm doing research personally for this topic. Who can I bribe into coming on the show? That's exactly how it flows. Yep. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I would love to have you back on. I know there's so much more that we can cover, and it's great to have somebody from a completely different country to share theories and see what's going on over there. And I hope that all the listeners and people that are tuning in and stuff that watch it enjoyed it as well. Shoot me a message, leave a comment on the show, and let me know if you'd like more of this and more of Andy, and we'll make sure we get him back. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today, Andy.
Thank you, Barbie. It's been awesome. Thanks so much.
Awesome. All right, guys, coming up this week, that is it for this show, but I'll be back on Thursday at 10 a.m. for the Paranormal Spectrum. It is 10 a.m. Central Time, and it is going to be a show with Austin Maynard, and we are going to be talking about ITC, ghost boxes, and other paranormal tech. And then, guys, coming up next week on Monday on Monsters on the Edge, my guest is going to be Alan McGargle, talking about Bigfoot and UFO connection and all kinds of weird stuff. It is a great show. That show, unfortunately, is a pre-recorded, so we won't be able to take comments and questions on that one. But it is a great show, great conversation, and a lot of good information on that one. So make sure you tune in next week on Monday here on the Untold Radio Network. So until then, guys, thank you so much for watching and tuning in and listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast and all of the shows here on the Untold Radio Network so all your friends and family can tune in and enjoy them as much as you do. Until next time, guys, I'll see you on the edge.